Question over here. Professor Kane, is it?
Yes. Pat Kane in the philosophy department. Two questions. I guess they're about the models and the potential financial upside and downside. The first question is about the flexibility built into the model. It looks like potentially, if all goes according to the model, we'd make about 18.6% revenue above cost from going this direction. But if there's more necessary flexibility to be built in, that is, if we only get about 85% of the enrollments we're looking for in various classes, it looks like we haven't recouped the revenue surplus that we were hoping for. But maybe that's built into the modeling. So I'm wondering, in the model for trimesters, my first question is, how much flexibility is there for enrollment fluctuations or enrollments coming short of targets?
Just in terms of the model, the 300,000 credit hours was kind of the target, the aspirational level to get to. So, you know, the flexibility is to the extent that we don't achieve that, I mean, the net will be less. So that 38.7 was really predicated upon meeting those kind of milestones. So to the extent that we don't make it there, there would be less for investment in that case.
But so maybe I can be more specific. The cost projections were based on current efficiencies projected out, right? So we're assuming we could do roughly as well per credit hour over the summer that we do on the current fall-spring model. Is that right? So additional flexibility beyond that cuts into the net revenue. Is that right?
Right. So to the extent that this gets developed and we realize efficiencies and flexibilities throughout this, then there are going to be adjustments to that. But to start out and try to make an assumption about if we could achieve that level, we had to begin with what was at least realistic, and realistic was what we've experienced and we're able to extract from IPEDS on a per credit hour basis. So it at least gave us a sense of reasonableness should we achieve that level. So there's opportunities for a lot of variations along the way.
Thank you. My second question, this is really brief. Have there been any calculations about the short-term inefficiencies of ramping up summer, perhaps lags in enrollment catching up to the fact that there are more offerings? And have there been any calculations about the cost in terms of faculty effort and time to transform the entire curriculum to a different model? Have there been any estimates about hours and the costs of that in terms of faculty time and so on?
I think the only way that I could really answer that is to the extent that those costs were embedded in how we were currently doing business, they're there. But should there be additional work that needs to be done, that would have to be taken into consideration. So it was kind of taking the as-is and applying it on a credit hour basis and trying to project out. So,
thank you.
First, Professor Williams.
Yes, I'm David Williams, and I'm Vice Chair of the University Senate. Can anyone in the room identify any other universities or any of our peer institutions that are currently successfully using the trimester model?
I was told by a student that the Ohio State University uses the trimester, but it was mandated. Is that not correct?
No, I think they're just converting
Quarters.
now.
Okay.
That's a much bigger move, by the way, to go from quarter to semester or vice versa. The only one that I've been following is University of Waterloo, and that's not a peer, but they are a research university in Canada, and they're worth further study. There are about 60 universities that in the U.S. that have tried it in the past, including Purdue, and for one reason or another have not continued with it. We're seeing the whole idea here is to get, and one of the reasons we have the long lead time is to see if we can make this a success and not repeat the mistakes that other universities have made in developing the balanced trimester. There was one example from New York State. I can't remember if it was Binghamton or one of the universities in New York that tried it, and they essentially forced everybody into it, just flipped the switch overnight, and went to admissions 3 times a year and told the students that they had to start fall, winter, or spring. They gave them an assignment. You're a summer student. You start in the summer. They created 3 equal cohorts, and predictably that failed. So one thing I can say from the evidence that's out there is that doing it too quickly and not thinking ahead about all the implications of such a change will probably lead to failure. But I think we should study the ones that are working well. And of course, in Europe, this wouldn't be a strange thing to do at all.
Paul, the University of Minnesota has announced that they're studying the issue. They announced it, I believe, this past March. And last week or 2 weeks ago, the University of Wisconsin-Madison announced at least they're going to try to substantially increase their summer school enrollment.
Marge Rashhavati from the IUPUI School of Engineering and Technology. I imagine the other regional campus representatives have this same question. Will this carry over to the regional campuses? If yes, how? If no, how will it affect transfers? Because we get a lot of people transferring from West Lafayette to IUPUI and back again. So that's a question I'd like to raise.
We did talk to the regionals at the beginning of this process, and they're involved in the decadal funding plan. And none of them elected to join in the announcement or be part of the initial discussion. But your point about the transfers is a good one, and we'll just have to see how that goes. I think there's a big impact on the community. We haven't talked about that yet. So a lot of it's going to be community dependent. And at this point, we have not talked about doing it system-wide.
Very good point.
Could we repeat the question, please? I'm afraid the microphone wasn't working or something.
Can you, well, the question was about cooperative programs. I can update the recording later because I understand the question, if that's okay. Over here.
Yeah, it's Kevin Gibson, Botany and Plant Pathology Department. I kind of want to go back to David Sanders' question, which is, and I wasn't quite sure I understood the answer. Is there a point during this process in which we pull the plug, in which we say that in fact this trimester system will not be adopted? And I wonder if you could talk about what that might look like.
Well, I can just give you a little history there, that the whole topic about the trimester, if you recall how it was introduced, the concept was that we would need to build up summer to, at that time we estimated about 35% of fall. Right now we're at about 7 or 8% in terms of credit hours. And I don't think anything's changed in the thinking that if we can't build up summer, then we can't make the switch. So we have to be able to prove that we can build up the summer. I think it remains to be determined what that trigger point would be and whether we're going to have a window to make a decision in about flipping the switch.
So if in this process where you're now getting faculty input and the input from faculty is largely negative, that we think it's a bad idea and there's not a large buy-in, how will that factor into this decision-making about the trimester?
Well, my own view on it is that faculty will follow their own and their primary committee, or not their primary committee, their department's lead on this. If we incentivize the summer and people utilize that option, then I expect that the support for flipping the calendar will increase. But I don't know that for a fact. If it turns out that despite the fact that the summer is being incentivized and facilitated, that the summer doesn't grow, then I don't know how I think that's the vote right there.
Professor Arif?
Walid Arif from Computer Science Department. I think it is important to make whatever we propose compatible with the existing system. So for example, at any point, if we go back, instead of revising each and every policy, we make sure we are backward compatible. In other words, we make it a requirement for this design, don't touch fall, don't touch the schedule, even the minutes for the classes, 2-3 minutes, whatever. No, leave it as is for fall, leave it as is for spring. And then whatever experimental schedule, just you have the summer, propose the new schedule for classes, professors, whatever is all in summer, so that at any point the existing system is does not suffer. We can at any point go back without having to have another plan for retreat.
Chris?
Hi, Chris Rosinna from chemistry. So the incentivization for summer to the faculty members is not particularly clear. As it turns out now, if you teach in the summer, the pay schedule is completely, or the pay rate is completely different, and it's sort of dependent from college to college and dean to dean. So I know in chemistry at least, they were paying, you know, if you taught the whole course, you'd get basically 50% of what you'd get if you taught it in the fall. And that's not going to incentivize anyone to go ahead and teach it. So is there any push, I've talked to Frank about this, but is there any push to sort of at a university level dictate the pay rate so that there's not this disparity between different colleges and pay rates too?
Well, I think I'm going to actually let Frank carry this one, but in principle, what we're trying to do is figure out how to make it possible for departments that want to promote summer instruction to do so. At the current funding scheme, that isn't even possible, really. So the first step is to make it possible for the faculty units to decide that they can move forward with the summer. As far as the details of how they would handle it internally, as far as I know, we have not dictated those, but Frank may comment on the kinds of discussions he's been having with the colleges.
As Jim showed in his presentation, the model, we started with the presumption that we wanted to provide enough funding for a faculty member to teach the course, and in some colleges that wasn't true, right? So we took average salary, 1 month average salary of all faculty in a college. We divided that number by 75, which is how many credit hours we're presuming that were generated by that course. It's 25 students in a 3-credit class, okay? And then as Jim pointed out, then there's some additional, we recognize there's additional cost. You end up, in our conversations with the deans and their staff from different colleges, I think this very much is part of their domain at this point, and from my perspective, it's important to recognize them and their role in this. But I can tell you that in each and every college, there is more funding available than there was in prior summers to support teaching. So what I would suggest is you go within your college and talk to your dean and your department head and find out how they're going to choose to administer the program in the College of Science. We are trying to get feedback from the different colleges on how they are actually administering that. We're in the process. We've received it from some, but not all at this point. And just like everything else at Purdue, we have very many models.
Yes, thank you. Bryce Carlson, Anthropology. I wonder if we could speak to some extent on the impact this would have on the culture of the institution or the feel of the place. So President Sands, in your draft paper you mentioned, or you referred to this as cohort synchronization and seemed to think that this wouldn't be a major problem. But I think it seems intuitive that students come here for more than a piece of paper and more than a set of skills that they can get a job with, that there's something, there's the Purdue experience that is more than just being in the classroom. And so I wonder if going to this system where, students are already on a number of different schedules and trajectories, but where you're increasing the flexibility, you're also increasing kind of the independence with which each student engages with their own college degree, that you're taking something away from that uniform kind of Purdue or Boilermaker experience.
It's a great point, something that's worth delving into in some detail. I don't have an answer for that, but that clearly would be a negative consequence of anything, any major change we would make, that somehow we would destroy the value of a Purdue degree. I don't think that's a necessary consequence of changing the calendar, but it's something that we should all think about hard. Thank you.
Professor Hill.
Michael Hill from Veterinary Clinical Sciences in the College of Veterinary Medicine. Tim, I'd like you to just clarify something that you said, and this may be just nuance. We're talking about an increased 4-year graduation rate. In my mind, if we go to trimester system, we should be focused on a 3-year graduation rate. Otherwise, we've created an artificial environment. We're simply having 12 trimesters rather than 8 semesters. So in fact, if we are going to improve graduation rates, it has to be 3-year graduation rate and not 4-year.
Well, the 4-year graduation rate is what we are increasingly measured by external ranking agencies, groups, by our state. And I guess you could argue about what the right metric is to use to evaluate the degree to which we are serving our students, admitting the right students, and supporting them through the process. So I think you're right that if we went to a trimester and had a really robust trimester system, that we would actually have a measurable 3-year graduation rate. I think that's true. Whether that's the one we should be looking at, I don't know. The original thinking was not so much along the 3-year, but looking at making it easier for students to complete in 4. But as I said, I think it's about 50 students a year do it in 3. They come in with a lot of credits. They use whatever summer we have, and they take 18, 19 credits during the fall and spring, and they can get through in 3. But I don't think focusing on any one metric is necessarily, I don't think any one of them is particularly special. I'm not sure I follow the exact line of thinking.
My concern is that if a student can graduate in 3 years, they've saved not a year in terms of college costs, but they are in the market for earning money. And so I think that is a reasonable metric.
It is. Matter of fact, if you, and I won't ascribe past comments by our governor to future comments by our president, but if you look at things that Mitch Daniels has said, he's made exactly that point, that if you could get through in 3 and you had a desire to get through in 3, and if you were socially and developmentally ready to move that quickly, then in principle it would save you money, and you would be able to enter the workforce sooner if that's the goal. I guess I would question whether that's, and it'd be worth asking our students, our aspirational students as well, whether that's something they would really want to do.
I just make a couple of comments. Why can't the expectation that it's going to be 2 trimesters on, 1 trimester off, addressing Ray's question about the downtime? As Ray ages, he may prefer to spend the spring in Florida and turn his year around. And not every course has to be taught in every semester.
I agree.
Professor Alter, sorry, I'll come back to you.
Kirk Alter, Building Construction Management. I can't help but get a sense that this is a bit of a fait accompli with a Field of Dreams twist to it. I hear discussions about what if we pull the plug? Well, what if we don't turn the spigot on to begin with? I also worry a little bit about transparency and lack of academic rigor, because so much of what we read that's posted is really essentially white paper stuff, when in fact we do have quite a bit of good information on the history of trimesters. I don't see anything that's posted that talks about the Ford Foundation report when University of Pittsburgh went through this and University of Florida went through this. And the idea, the primary mover of trimester is economic efficiency. It was then, it is now. Yet the history has not been that students will come. In our economic models, in our pro formas, we're projecting it sparkles with economic windfalls of 38.7 million, which then we round to 40 million from trimester. But that's the field of dreams piece. If I was a for-profit business creating a new model that I was thinking about trying out, I would do serious market analysis about whether or not they would in fact come. The history in higher education is they do not come. Therefore, we've changed our entire model based on pro forma that isn't founded in good market research from those who will be paying, the students and their parents. So I worry about that a little bit, and I really would like to see our discussion informed by, with a little more rigor, by, for example, Ford Foundation, and frankly, our President-elect Daniels is reading, much of his reading is focused around the Bain and Company 444 model, and we're not having a frank and open discussion about that, and when in fact that is exactly what's happening. And so I don't want to pull the plug. I'm not sure I want to turn the faucet on. And so I think that this whole discussion has not been adequately informed by faculty participation, in fact, as a train moving down the track. And I think that we should slow it down, have those transparent discussions informed by good academic rigor. And I'm curious why we can't do that.
Oh, we can certainly do that. I agree with what you're saying entirely. That, and that's why we've been planning a very slow process so that we have time to make those discoveries, to have those discussions. So I agree. If you tried to flip it, and this is a conversation that we need to have with our incoming president, he hasn't been involved in these discussions yet, so let's give him a little slack there. But I think those studies have to be done. You know, we've read some of that material. We've talked to people, but there are a lot of assumptions about what kind of market response there would be, and we haven't done the market analysis. I would caution you, though, in looking backward in the U.S. and not taking a little bit more of a global perspective. Things have changed a lot in the last 10, 20 years. And if we keep looking backwards in the U.S., I think we might end up backwards in the U.S.
Ray, Professor DiCarlo, sorry.
Hello. As I heard Kirk talk, I was thinking as a parent, my kids are out of college, but there's no way I could have afforded 3 semesters in a year. So we're really talking about, if you want to do trimesters, of a group of people who can afford to send their children to school. That's a 50% increase in tuition per year. I couldn't have afforded it, I know. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Good point.
Thomas Sigmund from the School of Mechanical Engineering. I have one concern. We are talking about the trimester plan being implemented very far out. On the other hand, the College of Engineering has announced a very ambitious hiring plan for the next 5 years. I'm very concerned that the effect of the uncertainty of the trimester plan and the perspective that is unknown to the faculty that we want to hire in this plan will be very detrimental in the hiring process, especially when we bring in senior faculty members that we want to recruit away from their current home institutions and bringing them into a situation that they will not potentially like will be very difficult to accomplish that, given that on top of the uncertainty that we'll retain with that. So it's not just a long-term outreach. There has to be clarity in perspective very urgently and very soon. And given the very much of a concern of many faculty members that I receive in my department, I'm really concerned about this process.
Well, you make a good point. I would think there are many aspects of faculty work that are under even more uncertainty. You heard me discussing a little bit about the situation with MOOCs and online, and that's going to have a bigger impact than any calendar change. So all I can say is you're right. It would be nice. That's why we did announce at least a blueprint for how we might expand the decision-making process over time, and we picked a date, and but all that is subject to some revision. And I think you raise a great point. I don't know how to do anything other than what we're doing right now, which is talking about it.
I just wondered, this is kind of a mundane question, if there's any information that's solid about how many of our students work over the summer to pay for their education. Is that a significant number of students?
It is. I don't have the number offhand, but maybe, Dale, do you know it offhand? Yeah. But we do have that data. We can. Yeah.
Can you turn your microphone on?
One of the things that I do know is that those who stay on campus average 4.5 credits. So right now it's very difficult from a student perspective to sacrifice work for being able to put together a partial schedule.
Ebony Barrett Kennedy, and in case you guys didn't know, I'm also a student here and full-time employee, so I have a bit of a different perspective on some of this. And so one of the questions that I have is, looking at this presentation that was given, one of the questions was about mental health. I would be concerned about clumping all students into one category when we're looking at these things. I happen to be a very motivated student who would like to finish any course in 6 weeks. I have some work experiences that add to some of my learning right now that some other students may not have. But I also understand that there are classes like laboratory sciences where that may not be possible. So, you know, I wanted to point out the fact that you have all different kinds of students. Even when I was a traditional student, you see all different kinds of traditional students, some that are so motivated that they graduate in 3 years, some that, you know, may need to take a little bit longer. So let's try to be careful about categorizing everyone the same.
Good point, Professor Derzenkiewicz.
Janusz Drzynkiewicz, North Central Campus. What is the stance of the Board of Trustees on this issue, and do they have the final word?
Well, I think the stance of the Board of Trustees is that they're supportive of the idea of the balanced trimester, and they've folded that into the decadal funding plan. But as to a final word, I'm not sure, you know, practically speaking, how one could force us into that kind of situation if it didn't make any sense. So they do have some degree of control, although they've certainly, the spirit of the interaction between the board and the faculty should be that the faculty have control over the curriculum and control over the calendar. So practically speaking, this is the body that you and the people that you represent that will ultimately make it or break it in terms of moving forward into a new calendar.
Could you just repeat that in case the camera didn't get it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it absolutely is true. How could this, you know, how could we move forward? We could create it, but it would be a failure if the faculty didn't buy into it and if we didn't see the advantage. I don't think, based on the discussion we're having now and even the discussion that preceded this over the last year or two, it's clear that there are a lot of issues that would have to be resolved before we would finally move forward.
We've only got a few more minutes, so let's move these questions quickly.
Yuan Yi from Industrial Engineering again. I'm just thinking if we really want to pursue this, one of the things could possibly work is at least balance the number of weeks among those 3 semesters. So the summer is not a especially short semester. So it's equal semester, just like any others. Although if you start it as still a summer session, I think one of the problem is faculty are not really interested in teaching in the summer section. It's a very different type of instruction with condensed time, and student doesn't want to take the summer course because, again, same reason that I have to do the semester work within 5 weeks or 8 weeks. But if we have balanced, the summer section is the same length as the regular semester length to start with, and still call it a summer semester, then you set up the infrastructure and to see whether we actually can increase the courses offering the summer, increase the enrollment in the summer, because actually the student have an opportunity to look at that as a regular semester course structure, just as the same as the spring and fall. If we see the increase enrollment on that, maybe this will become a viable discussion. If we don't have the student interested in the summer, I think we were talking about try to change the structure of the university, but there's really no demand in the summer courses. I don't think this is going to be successful.
I don't know if I think what you're suggesting would be an interesting way to go, but it actually is fairly risky and would be kind of costly, I think, but it's an interesting way to go. It would be great to be able to do the experiment, you know, to really flip the calendar, go to a balanced trimester, and then grow it from there. But that would take a lot of faith and confidence, and we would have to have done that market analysis with very great care to get to that point. I guess what we're thinking about in terms of the way we've been discussing it is that there would be a period of years through which we would try to build the summer as far as we can as part of our marketing, if you will, or discussion about, or as part of our information gathering process. And then only when we got to a certain point would the calendar be flipped. The problem is that you can't get to 70% utilization in the summer without flipping the calendar, but we think we might be able to get to 35%. And if we saw that growth, then it might give us some confidence that we could flip it without a negative consequence to the university, to the faculty, the students. But that interesting thought process there. Thank you.
Professor Beck, then Professor Rossi. And then we have a couple of other issues to deal with, correct?
Alan Beck, the veterinary school. Rather than flipping it, has there been thought of that, would 35% be enough to get us the best of both? Where we'd have a semester system that most people seem to be comfortable with, but enough of a summer commitment to help the local community and to help those who want to take some more courses. In other words, really view this as a setting up a balance rather than an opportunity to flip the calendar completely.
Well, I think we get up to 35% summer and we stop there, that would be an improvement. Well, we wouldn't have the, I don't think we would have the net revenue and the ability to control tuition at the level we would at 70%. And I don't think we could get, based in the current way of thinking, from the 35 to the 70 without flipping the calendar. But it may happen that over the course of the next couple of years, because of the changes in the way we deliver courses that we talked about earlier, there may be other considerations that change our way of thinking. It's a moving target, but you raise a good point that anything we do to build up the summer, and that's why it's worth doing either way, anything we do to build up the summer will make it easier for our students to complete when they want to complete, and will have some advantage to building up our local economy, which is completely dead in the summer. It makes it hard for us to do dual career hires and that kind of thing.
Professor Rossi.
So is the presumption that if we have a trimester that we're going to increase enrollment overall? Because if we don't, we're just going to have an increased rate of flux of the same number of students through the system. So that's not going to increase the revenue.
You raise a good point. One of the reasons that we didn't consider it earlier was that we didn't see the application pressure building. Things have changed, and we had a record number of applications last year, almost 31,000. And as I mentioned in the slide that I showed in January, one of the bullets at the top of one of those slides was, this all assumes that the application pressure will continue to grow.
Sorry.
They have grown as well in terms of every measurable. Yeah.
In the interest of finishing our Senate meeting in a reasonable time, I think we have to draw the discussion to a close. But in so doing, what I would request is that any of you who have questions or have statements that you would like to make, would you please send them to me or to our parliamentarian whose address you all have. But you can send them to me and we will compile them. And one of the goals is to take the recording and identify all the issues and put them down and then move on from there. But this has certainly been, in my opinion, an excellent way of bringing the issues to the table, and I really appreciate President Sands being very open and discussing, and all the colleagues who have presented here This has been, in my opinion, a really excellent opportunity for hopefully what we are really engaged in, which is shared governance. So in the interests of that, I'm going to close that discussion for this moment and ask if there is some new business. Professor Levy.